In today's short video, I'm going to be talking about a state that I call totality. Sometimes a feeling or a state of mind becomes so all-pervasive that it's all we can feel and all we can think about, and our entire experience for hours or days or even years of our lives. There's something strangely reassuring and almost addictive about a state of mind or a feeling that just blots out all others, and we can't feel anything else and we can't sense anything else because we're so wrapped up in this one experience we're having. This might be happiness or love or joy, but it also might be sadness or grief or rage. Many people go long periods of their lives just feeling one predominant emotion. So today I'm going to be talking about this state that I call totality. I'm going to be explaining how it works, why it becomes a problem, and what we can do about it. As ever, if you find this video useful, then please remember to give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and leave me a comment to let me know what you think. So there's a state that I notice people getting into sometimes. I've named it totality because, well, you'll come on to see why I've called it this, but it's a way that we can become locked in a single feeling or a single perspective, and it begins to filter all the information that we receive, and over time it kind of rewrites who we are. It changes our very identity. So it begins with a single feeling, and then it gets passed through two little habits that our minds have, little tricks that they play on us. But if we don't understand what's going on and if we don't pay attention to the right things, then we end up trapped in a state, and it can have some really long-term negative effects on us. So today I'm just going to be exploring what are these two little tricks that our minds play, 3 examples of how this works in practice. So I'll be using sadness and fear and happiness as examples of how this totality state can end up warping our experience of life. And just a whole bunch of advice about how you identify and escape these things in yourself, or advice you can give to someone else if they seem to have got lost in one of these states. Before I begin, I will just explain that this isn't the same as mental health issues. So if you have a diagnosable condition like depression or anxiety or a personality disorder, just paying attention to the right things and applying a bit of willpower is not going to make that go away. That's a much more complex condition, and I just really encourage you to treat that as a medical thing. Mental health is health, and if you feel you are trapped in one of those states, then that's a sort of thing to get some medical or professional advice about and treat seriously. So there may be overlap, there might be some stuff in today's video which is very helpful, and certainly mental health things can lead to the kind of states that I'm talking about in today's video. But just to distinguish that, well, I'm going to be saying that the right kind of perspective and the right kind of approach could just make this go away. That doesn't apply to mental health conditions. So 2 little habits that our brains have. One, there's a lot of evidence to show that our minds would rather stick with things that are comfortable, familiar, and known than risk, growth, and ultimately happiness. We know that taking regular risks in our lives leads to improved well-being. We know that it improves our confidence and the way that we approach things, and opens the sphere of opportunities and experiences in our lives. Makes it wider, makes it bigger, stretches our comfort zone, makes us stronger and more resilient people. It's just great. It's a good idea to be doing that on a regular basis. But the mind will tend to stick with things that are known and familiar, and it will tend to shy away from doing new or unfamiliar things. So it's a thing that we're trying to compensate for a lot in personal development. Personal development has a big goal of self-awareness. The better you understand yourself and your brain and your mind and the way your feelings work and all of these things, the more information you have at hand and the more ways you know to make that practicable, put it into practice, then the more control you have, more genuine control you have over these things. But the mind will tend to play little tricks on us, and one of them is this habit to stay with things that are familiar. So most people will, most of the time, be kind of tending towards things that are within their comfort zone, things they've done every day or things they do all the time. And the idea of doing the unknown, the unfamiliar, the risky is sort of a thing that we naturally tend to shy away from. So we try to kind of inspire ourselves and motivate ourselves to go out into that risk zone and take some risks, do new things on a regular basis. But this is one habit that the mind has. It will tend to stick with things that are known, even if they're unpleasant, even if our lives feel rubbish, even if we're miserable a lot of the time, we will still tend to stick with things that we know and that we understand well. So that's one habit that our minds have. Another one is if you're having an emotional experience that you're not properly identifying and you're not really conscious of, you will tend to explain the actions that arise from that experience in any way you can. So the mind wants to feel in control. It wants to feel like you're not mad, that you're not just doing random things, and it will try to give you an explanation that in the moment makes sense to you, even if it doesn't really match the facts at hand. So an example of this would be if you're hungry. Okay, so a lot of people get kind of hangry when they get hungry. It's one of the fundamental human needs, and if needs aren't met, they will try to manipulate our behavior to get met. So if you are hangry, then you might lash out at people, you might shout at people, you might be surly and grumpy, you might feel unpleasant to other people. But in the moment, if you don't notice that you haven't eaten and that that's where this behavior is coming from, then you will tend to want to explain it in another way. You might tell yourself that that person shouldn't have spoken to you like that, or that person is stupid in the way that they're behaving. Or you've just been under a lot of pressure recently, and that's why you're acting like this. So that's an example of just a way that the mind notices a behavior, doesn't link it to an emotional or physiological underpinning, and will just come up with some kind of explanation so that you still feel like you're in control, that you're making sense, that you're not mad. So this is a thing that the mind does. It would rather prioritize justifying your current behavior over truth. And that's just another thing that our minds do. It will tell us stories, and it will give us, it will serve up a justification for something we're doing, rather than allow us to interrogate the actual underlying cause. So these two habits that our minds have, the tendency towards comfort and safety and the familiar and the known, and coming up with an explanation for behavior, even if it doesn't really make any sense, just giving some explanation. These two things co-opt and they can lock us into a state. So the way that this works, it begins with an emotion. So for example, sadness. Let's take this one, this first example, sadness. Either something in your life makes you sad. You have a difficult experience, you're around a lot of sad people for a while, you just find yourself having a sad feeling for a while. That can be a reason. So it's actually an external input. Or it is an early life conditioning that the appropriate way to respond to life is sadness. One of those two things is occurring, but certainly you are feeling sad. You then begin to behave slightly differently because sadness is motivating your choices and your feelings and your responses and your words and your thinking. And so you just respond slightly differently. You start acting slightly differently. Perhaps you start shying away from social contact. Perhaps you start anticipating bad things rather than good things. Whatever it is that your sadness kind of just naturally motivates you to do, you'll start to do, and then your mind will try and explain away why you're behaving like this if you don't notice that you are feeling sad. So you might find yourself telling yourself or other people different justifications for your behavior. I chose not to go out because I don't really like those people. I didn't really want to go out. Or I'm really tired. That's a common one. Something. You'll try and, in the moment, just try and give yourself a justification for why you're behaving in this new way. And then you can hear that justification, that belief, that idea, and you can start to fully embrace it, fully believe it, fully take it on board. And then it can end up becoming a sort of self-referential thing. The sadness leads to the behavior leads to the underlying belief, and then the belief leads you to kind of stay within a sad state. And it becomes a loop that over time, over enough time, will begin to rewrite our very identity. If you met up with a friend, not having seen them for a few years, and you'd been stuck in one of these states, then they might be shocked at your behavior and your underlying beliefs and the things that you vehemently will put forward as beliefs about the world, because they weren't the way you used to act, and they weren't the things you used to believe, but you've become someone else because you've got stuck in this loop. Another example then would be fear. We have a fearful experience, or early life experiences have taught you to respond to the world with fear. So it's always kind of waiting to be triggered. But you feel afraid, and then you begin to change your behavior a little bit. Just briefly, you're afraid, but you change your behavior for a little while. You don't want to go out, you don't want to see people, you'd rather shy away from new experiences. And then you need to justify it because you haven't really acknowledged what's going on under the hood here. So you start to come up with explanations in your mind as to why you're behaving like this. Why is it that you've chosen to shy away from these people? Why haven't you been calling your old friends so much? Why have you not been putting yourself forward for things at work? But you'll come up with an explanation just to make this whole thing make sense in the mind. So you will tell yourself stories, and then those will become beliefs, and they'll become a self-referencing thing because you'll believe that, and so it will reinforce the emotion. And over time, again, we just become a more fearful, insular person. That's a thing that perhaps you can recognize in yourself, or can you think of someone in your life who this has happened to? So I call it totality because it becomes this wraparound experience that filters everything else that comes in, and every choice that we make. It becomes the sort of the light by which we are living our lives. Everything just shifts a little bit in one direction. And all of our choices and all our relationships and all of our responses to the world and all of our beliefs about the world and about ourselves all subtly shift over time in this particular direction. And it becomes kind of like a shell that has to be broken through in order to have a new feeling or a new experience, or to begin, letting other information in. Finally, happiness can be its own trap. It can be its own problem. If you are really happy, you have a new relationship or a new job, or you move to a new town and everything is better and you start feeling really, really happy, you can then become really attached to that feeling. You want happiness to continue. And so you'll end up batting away other information or challenges or changes or things that actually are an ongoing problem. Perhaps your relationship is actually not good for you, or perhaps there's a problem with your new job, but you want to hang on to that feeling of happiness. And so you end up trapped again in this totality experience of not wanting to let other information in. So this is a cascade that happens. We have an emotion which is strong and stays around for a while. It leads to behavior changes. We just end up acting in certain ways. Our mind wants to explain why we're behaving like this, saying these words, choosing these things, and so it says, hey, here's the reason. It's not the actual origin. Here's a perfectly good reason why you need to keep acting like this. We come to believe it, and then over time those beliefs become part of our identity. We're then locked into a single state of being, a single perspective, a single feeling, a single way of seeing the world. And you can stay locked in this for years of your life. You will meet people, or you may identify a period of your life where you have become locked into a single perspective, a single feeling, and it's become dominant, and you simply can't escape it. What do we do about this? Well, we do the same thing as we do in a lot of personal development. We just bring attention to the right places. We start understanding our underlying feelings. We start picking apart our belief structures. We start inquiring, how did this begin? Where did it begin? How did I become like this? So, number one, the main bit of advice here is curiosity. It's one of those two great virtues of personal development that I talk about in my book, curiosity and determination. And as long as we are curious about ourselves and about the world, then there is potential for change. Things can shift. So the first and most important thing here is to just try to maintain a sense of curiosity. Don't allow yourself to become so attached to the way that things are right now that there's no possibility of letting anything else in. And the second thing is to really combat those habits of the mind, to stay with the familiar and to explain away things even if it's not true, by trying to make truth a virtue, trying to make it a core value of yours. Try to interrogate what is going on inside of you or around you for truth. Is this true, or is this just a story? Is this just an explanation? Is this just a temporary way of being able to make something okay? Is this a response to a feeling, or can I actually verify this with evidence? Can I see it in my own behavior? Can I see it in the behavior of others? If someone says to you, wow, you've really changed, you didn't used to be like this, then inquire whether there's truth in that statement or not. Try not to just dismiss things because you are wrapped up in this state and you've been trapped in it for a while and you've allowed it to become a part of your defining identity. Remain open to truth that can transform. Is there truth for you to discover underneath the beliefs you're currently carrying? It's always worth revisiting the things that we believe so that we can understand whether they still feel true for us, whether they still have meaning for us. I hope that video has been useful. I hope it's been able to explain some of the things that the mind does and some of these states we can become trapped in and why. If that one has been useful, then remember to give this video a like. If you'd like me to unpack some aspect of this video, maybe those habits that the mind has, or maybe more about this totality state that I'm explaining, then please pop a comment on this video and I'm very happy to revisit this and go into it or an aspect of it in more detail. Always am, love talking about this stuff. Until next time, I hope this video has been useful. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.